"Wear her clothes, fat girl," Mountain Man ordered his obese replacement wife. Then he saw her soul. "Wear her clothes, fat girl." The words hadn't been spoken yet, but they were already hanging somewhere in the future, waiting for the moment a broken mountain man would say them to the wrong woman for the wrong reasons. That future began on a blistering summer afternoon in 1885, in the middle of Asheville's town square. The whole town had come out for the debt auction: cows, wagons, tools, rifles, and at the very end of the line, a human being, Rosalind Harper. She stood on the rough plank platform with her wrists tied in front of her, bare feet burning on sun-baked wood. 26 years old, 5'4", and more than 200 pounds. Her dress, once a soft blue, pulled tight across her stomach and hips, the seams protesting every shallow breath she took. Dark hair tumbled loose down her back, damp with sweat. Her cheeks were round, flushed, and streaked with dried tears. "Last lot of the day," bawled Mr. Morrison, the landowner who'd taken her father's debts and, with them, her life. "Strong back, big arms, eats like 3 farm hands and works like one. Start the bidding at $20 for the fat girl." Laughter rolled through the crowd like a wave. "20? You should pay us to feed her." "She'll crush the wagon if you put her in it." Rosalind dropped her eyes to the boards, clenching her tied hands so hard her knuckles went white. She could handle the heat. She could handle the hunger. What she never got used to was the way men pointed, the way women sneered, the way every extra pound on her body became proof she did not deserve dignity. Her father had died 3 months earlier, lungs eaten away in a wet, choking cough. The day they buried him, Morrison had stood at the grave with a ledger in his hand and a smile on his face. $180 plus interest, girl," he'd said. "You can't pay it, so I'll sell what you got left." What she had left was herself. "15, then!" Morrison barked now, sweeping off his hat, sweat gleaming on his bald head. "Come on, boys. She'll pull a plow and eat your scraps. $15 is a bargain." No one raised a hand. A boy threw a pebble. It hit her ankle. More laughter. Rosalind lifted her head just once to stare past the faces, past the spitting mouths and hard eyes, to the line of mountains beyond the town. Blue, green, and hazy, they looked like another world. Somewhere up there, she imagined, people forgot what you weighed and cared only whether your heart was kind and your hands were willing. No such world existed. Not for her. $10, Morrison snapped, temper flaring. $10 for the Harper girl and her big bones. Anyone. Silence stretched. Then a voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. Low, rough, cold as creek water in winter. $500. Every head turned. He stepped forward slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. Tall, broad-shouldered, despite the leanness under his worn coat, with dark hair tied back at his nape and a clean-shaven jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes were the unsettling part, pale gray, flat, and distant, like a man who had once lived and then decided never to do it again. Matthias Thornwood. People whispered his name like a superstition. The ghost painter, the widower on the mountain, the man who'd built a house in the woods and filled it with portraits of a woman who'd died 10 years ago and taken his soul with her. Morrison gaped. "Did you say 500? Matthias dropped a bulging leather pouch onto the edge of the platform. The heavy clink of coins silenced every breath. "She settles the Harper debt," he said calmly, "and whatever's left, you can drink." Rosalind stared at him stunned. No one had ever paid anything for her. Not a favor, not a kind word. And here this stranger was, throwing down more money than her father had earned in 3 years. Why?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Matthias finally looked at her fully. For just a heartbeat, his dead gray eyes flickered, not with pity, not with hunger, recognition, not of her, of someone else. "Untie her," he told Morrison. "She's coming with me. Before I tell you what he makes her do in that house on the mountain, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from right now?" Rosalind almost fell when the ropes came off her wrists. Blood rushed back into her hands in sharp, stinging needles. She cradled them against her chest as Morrison scooped up the pouch, grinning like a man who'd just found gold in his soup. "Well, Rosie girl," he said loudly so the crowd could hear, "looks like someone's actually desperate enough to buy you." Laughter again, always laughter. Rosalind swallowed her shame and kept her chin level. She had learned, the hard way, that crying only made them laugh louder. Her father hadn't been cruel. He'd been tired. A soft-spoken man with sawdust in his hair and calluses on his palms, he'd always said Rosalind was solid, like good oak. But when the coughing started, when the blood appeared on his handkerchief, he'd grown thin and scared, watching the bills pile up on the table. "I'm sorry, Rosie," he'd whispered on the last night, hand shaking in hers. "If I'd been stronger." She had held his hand until it went cold. And Morrison had come the next morning with a ledger and a calculating smile. You could not beg a number to shrink. You could not plead with interest rates or make an empty purse full by wishing. Rosalind had tried. When the math refused to bend, she had offered herself in place of the sum, hoping to work it off as a servant. Morrison had agreed. Then he'd driven her into town and put her on a platform like a piece of livestock. "You belong to him now," he told her, jerking his chin toward Matthias. "Pray he doesn't feed you to the wolves." Matthias didn't touch her. He simply turned and started walking away through the crowd, assuming she would follow. Rosalind hesitated. Freedom, such as it was, still lay at her back. Dust, heat, and people who had never wanted her. A stranger with a dead man's gaze stood ahead. She lifted her skirts to keep from tripping and went after the stranger. Outside the town limits, the noise of Asheville fell away, leaving only the creak of leather and the steady clop of hooves. Matthias had a sturdy wagon hitched to a broad-chested bay gelding. He climbed up onto the seat and jerked his head toward the space beside him. "Get in," he said. No introduction, no offer of a hand. Rosalind hauled herself up, cheeks burning with the effort. The wood complained under her weight. She waited for the wince, the joke, the sigh of irritation she'd heard from men all her life. Matthias only picked up the reins. They rode in silence. The road wound up and away from town, trading storefronts and boardwalks for fields and then for trees. The air cooled as they climbed, carrying the clean sting of pine and damp earth. Rosalind's stomach growled, loud in the quiet. She pressed a mortified hand over it. "How long?" she managed finally. "Until we get wherever we're going." 4 hours, he said, "give or take." "Oh." She folded her hands in her lap, fingers twisting together. "May I ask you something, sir?" Matthias kept his eyes on the road. "You can ask." "Why did you pay so much for me?" The question had been beating at her ribs from the moment he said 500. She had expected to be sold for scraps. Instead, she cost enough to buy a fine horse, a new wagon, and land besides. He didn't answer at once. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking by his ear. "You resemble someone," he said finally. "Someone you know?" "Someone I knew." There was a weight in the past tense heavy enough to crush. Rosalind opened her mouth, then closed it again. Curiosity tugged hard, but she had lived enough life to recognize a door that wasn't ready to be opened. They passed a cluster of cabins clinging to the lower slopes, smoke drifting from stone chimneys. Children paused in their play to stare at the wagon. Women straightened from wash lines and vegetable patches, eyes narrowing as they took in Rosalind's size, her worn dress, the unfamiliar man at her side. Rosalind shifted under their gaze, shoulders hunching. In town, she had always been the biggest woman in any room, the joke in every corner. Here, among people lean from mountain living, she felt even larger, clumsier, wrong. Matthias never slowed. As the road grew steeper, the world narrowed to trees and sky. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in shifting gold patterns, tracing over Matthias's profile. Straight nose, hard mouth, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Where are you from?" he asked abruptly. The question startled her. "Here," she said. "Near enough, anyway. My father's farm is 5 miles east of town. Was. I suppose it's Morrison's now." "Your mother?" "Died when I was 12. Fever." Rosalind swallowed. "It's just been me and my father since. He used to say I was his best helper, too strong for my own good." She tried to smile. It twisted at the edges. Matthias's hands flexed on the reins. "Mine died in childbirth." The muscles in her chest clenched. "Your mother?" "My wife," he said, "and our child." Silence dropped again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet, not empty, heavy. "I'm sorry," Rosalind said softly. He didn't respond, but the set of his shoulders shifted, some rigid thing bending inward. As they climbed higher, the air cooled further, threading through the fabric of her dress. Goosebumps rose on her bare forearms. She rubbed them briskly, trying to keep her teeth from chattering. Matthias noticed. Without a word, he reached behind the seat, pulled out a folded wool blanket, and held it out. She blinked. "For me?" "For the horse, obviously," he said dryly. "Take it." A laugh escaped her, surprised and small. She draped the blanket over her shoulders. It smelled faintly of wood smoke and turpentine, of a house that had held more conversations than she had heard in years. When the trees finally broke, they did it all at once. The cabin sat on a natural shelf of land, overlooking a valley spilling out beneath it like a painted backdrop. It was larger than any farmhouse Rosalind had ever seen up close. 2 stories, wide porches, glass in the windows instead of oiled paper. The logs were fitted so tightly she could barely see the seams. Flower beds lined the front path, untended now, choked with wild green, but still hinting at a hand that had once cared deeply. It did not look like the home of a hermit. It looked like the home of a man who had expected to fill it with a life and then never had. Matthias set the brake and climbed down. Rosalind followed, legs stiff, eyes wide. Inside the house was cool and dim. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Linseed oil, old smoke, something floral beneath it all, like dried lavender tucked into drawers. The second thing she noticed were the paintings. They hung on every wall, over the fireplace, beside the staircase. in the shadowed hallway leading deeper into the house, some large as doorways, others small as a handspan, all of them of the same woman. She was plump, with soft curves and a generous bosom, dark hair pinned up or tumbling loose, depending on the canvas, warm brown eyes that seemed to follow Rosalind wherever she turned. Rosalind's breath stalled. Every portrait looked like her. Not exactly. The angles were different, the jaw a touch sharper, the nose a little narrower. But the resemblance was close enough to be unsettling, like seeing a sister you'd never met, or the way you might look if your life had been gentler. "Who is she?" Rosalind whispered. Matthias stepped past her, hand trailing briefly along the frame of the largest portrait above the mantel. In it, the woman sat in a high-backed chair, laughing at something out of frame, joy caught forever in the artist's sure strokes. "Helena," he said quietly, "my wife." The word "my" landed between them like a stone. Rosalind's throat went dry. "And you bought me because I look like her." At last he faced her fully. In his eyes, she saw the truth she'd felt the moment he'd spoken in the square. "I brought you here," he said, voice hoarse, "because I needed her." He let the past tense hang uncorrected. Then he added, with a roughness that scraped against bone, "From now on, you will live in this house. You will eat at this table. You will sleep in that bed upstairs." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "And you will wear her clothes." Rosalind's breath caught, her fingers curling instinctively into the wool blanket around her shoulders. "Wear her clothes?" she echoed. Matthias didn't blink. "They're in the wardrobe upstairs. I've kept them clean, pressed, preserved." He spoke with the precision of a man describing something holy, something untouchable, something he'd never let himself lose. Rosalind stepped back. "But I'm not her." "No," he said, voice scraping raw. "You aren't, but you resemble her closely enough that—" He faltered, jaw tightening until a vein stood out along his neck. "It will help." "Help what?" "Help me remember," he said quietly. Silence pressed between them, thick and breathless. "Remember, not mourn, not heal. Remember." The distinction chilled her. "Come," he said, turning toward the stairs. "I'll show you where you'll sleep." She followed because she had no other choice, because the woods behind them stretched for miles with bears and wolves and cliffs, because going back to town meant chains and debt and Morrison's hands on her again, because she had nowhere else to exist. The stairs creaked as they climbed. At the top was a long hallway, lit by the fading afternoon sunlight slanting through narrow windows. Every few feet hung another portrait of Helena. Helena reading, Helena sewing, Helena with her head thrown back in laughter, Helena heavy with child hands resting on her stomach. Matthias walked past each painting without looking, but his shoulders stiffened at precise, familiar moments. When they passed the portrait of Helena in a spring meadow, when they passed the one of her in her wedding dress, when they passed the one where her cheeks were hollowed, her smile soft, her hands folded quietly in her lap. The last painting, the last months. He paused outside a doorway and pushed it open. "This is the room." The bedroom was large, sunlight pooling across a four-poster bed draped in white linens, rose-printed curtains, a vanity with a silver-backed brush neatly aligned, a bookshelf, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed where Helena's portrait hung above the headboard. It was a shrine. Rosalind swallowed. "Is this her room?" "It's your room now," Matthias said, "at least during the day. At night—" He didn't finish the sentence. She felt her stomach twist. "At night? You will sleep here," he said calmly, "but occasionally I will ask you to sit with me. Downstairs, at the table, in the rocker by the fire, in the garden. I may ask you to walk with me the way she used to. I may ask you to speak as she spoke." Her heart sank. "You want me to pretend to be her?" He didn't deny it. "I want peace," Matthias said, "and for the first time in 10 years, you make that possible. By pretending to be a dead woman. By being close enough that my mind can rest." She stood rigid, breath thin. "And if I refuse?" His eyes hardened, a frost settling over his expression. "You won't." "How can you be sure?" Matthias stepped closer, not threatening, just certain. His voice shifted, not cruel, not cold, but unbearably tired. "Because I paid your debts. Because you have no home, no money, no kin left in this world. Because you would not survive a week alone in these mountains." Her throat burned with humiliation. "And because," he added softly, as if the words hurt him more than they hurt her, "I would never harm you. I give you my word. You will not be touched in any way that is not respectful. I am not asking for your body, only your presence." She lifted her chin. "And in return? You will live well, eat well, sleep safely. You will be treated with dignity. You will never be mocked again." Dignity? From a man who wanted her to wear another woman's skin. Rosalind wrapped her arms around herself. What do you want me to do now?" Matthias gestured to the wardrobe. "The clothes." Her pulse stuttered. "Right now?" "Yes." He stepped back toward the door, turned his shoulder to give her privacy, an oddly courteous gesture for such a disturbing request. "I will wait in the hall," he said. "When you're ready, tell me." He left the room. Rosalind stared at the wardrobe, her stomach twisting. She approached it slowly, fingers trembling as she opened the carved wooden doors. The smell hit her first, lavender and something soft, something feminine and warm. Helena's scent, preserved through years of grief and devotion. Inside hung dresses in shades of cream, rose, deep green, navy blue, lace collars, pearl buttons, sleeves neatly folded. She touched one. The fabric was soft beneath her fingertips, worn in the way clothes become when someone loves them, wears them, lives in them. Her reflection stared back from a small mirror inside the wardrobe. Round cheeks, heavy arms, full hips, everything she'd been mocked for. Everything Helena had seemed to wear with grace. Rosalind whispered to the empty room, voice breaking. "I'm sorry. Whoever you were, I'm sorry he can't let you go." She lifted the cream-colored dress from the hanger. Sliding into it felt like slipping into someone else's life, someone else's shadow, someone else's unfinished story. The button strained slightly across her bust. Helena had been softer in some places, smaller in others, but the overall fit was unsettlingly perfect. She stood in the mirror, breath shaking. For the first time, she understood Matthias's shock. She did look like Helena, enough to haunt. A faint knock touched the door. "Are you ready?" Matthias asked quietly. Rosalind closed her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. He opened the door slowly, his breath caught, not lust, not joy, recognition, pain, hope, a man seeing a ghost and desperately wanting it to be real. "Helena," he breathed. Rosalind's heart twisted so violently she almost reached for her own hand to steady it. "My name is Rosalind," she said softly. Matthias closed his eyes, grief shuddering through him. "Not tonight," he said. "Tonight. Just let me remember." The dress felt too tight, too soft, too full of another woman's memories. Rosalind followed Matthias downstairs, each step careful, almost reverent, as if she were walking through a graveyard rather than a house. And in many ways, she was. Every board, every beam, every painting whispered the same name, Helena. She expected Matthias to turn stern, demanding, obsessive. Instead, he moved slowly, as though afraid a sudden motion might break the illusion he'd paid so dearly to resurrect. He guided her to the dining room, a long table set for two, though one chair had clearly never been used in years. "Sit," he said quietly, gesturing to the empty seat. She always sat here, by the window. She liked the morning light. Rosalind sank into the chair. The wood creaked beneath her weight, but Matthias didn't flinch or look embarrassed on her behalf. He simply moved around the table with careful precision, pouring water into a glass. "She liked her water cool," he murmured, "with a slice of lemon." Rosalind folded her hands on her lap. "Would you like me to pretend? Speak as she did?" Matthias paused. His eyes flicked to hers, gray, unreadable, but not unfeeling. "No," he said, "not yet. Just sit. It's enough." Enough. The word felt like both a mercy and a chain. He served her a bowl of vegetable soup, thick and fragrant. Her stomach clenched painfully at the sight. She hadn't eaten more than dry bread in 2 days. "Eat," Matthias said. "You need strength in these mountains." Rosalind hesitated. She wasn't used to eating first. She wasn't used to being watched without contempt when she lifted a spoon to her lips. But Matthias simply sat across from her and looked, not at her body, not at her size, but at the dress, at Helena in Rosalind's shape. She sipped the soup. Warmth flooded her chest, her limbs, her throat. Her eyes burned. "Good?" he asked. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. He ate slowly, mechanically, as though he'd forgotten what food tasted like and was only going through the motions. Afterward, he led her to the front porch. 2 rocking chairs sat beneath the overhang. One cushion was flattened from years of use. The other looked untouched. Matthias gestured to the unused chair. She preferred that one, he said, because she could see the valley from there. Rosalind sat. The sunset stretched across the horizon in bruised purples and burning golds, mountain ridges layered like folded fabric. The air tasted of pine and impending night. "It's beautiful," she whispered. A ghost of a smile tugged at Matthias's mouth. She used to say the same. The evening passed in silence. No expectations, no commands, only the steady creak of the rocking chairs. Inside, she heard the clock tick, the floorboard settle, the soft sigh of a house that had waited too long for footsteps. When the last hint of daylight faded, Matthias rose. "You should rest," he said. Rosalind stood as well, fingers tugging nervously at the sleeves of the borrowed dress. "And you?" "I'll stay down here. I sketch at night." "Sketch?" He nodded toward a closed door off the main room. "My studio." She hesitated. "May I see it?" For the first time since arriving, true fear flickered across his face, not of her, but of letting her into a room held together by grief. "Not tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow, maybe." She nodded, accepting the boundary. Upstairs in Helena's room, she undressed slowly, carefully. Folding the dress with tenderness, she didn't fully understand. She couldn't bring herself to hang it up yet. It felt too intimate, too heavy, with someone else's story. She slipped into a nightgown Matthias had left folded on the bed. Soft cotton, simple, comfortable, too comfortable. Helena's, no doubt. As she crawled beneath the quilt, exhaustion settling into her bones, the door creaked open. Matthias stood on the threshold, eyes lowered in respect. I just, he cleared his throat, wanted to say, thank you. For what? Rosalind whispered. For giving me one quiet evening. He stepped back, began to close the door, then paused. Good night, Helena. The name pierced her. Good night, she said softly, unable to say anything else without breaking. The door shut quietly. Rosalind lay awake long after footsteps faded downstairs, listening to the faint sounds of charcoal scratching paper, of grief shaping itself into lines and shadows. For 3 days, the pattern repeated. Morning light, breakfast at the table, walks through the overgrown garden where Matthias pointed out which flowers Helena had planted, which ones she'd loved. She tended them every day, he said once, his voice distant, even when the pregnancy made her tired. Rosalind didn't know what to say. There were no words for a loss so old and still so fresh. When she washed dishes, he stood nearby, not to supervise, but because sitting alone felt unbearable for him. When she read in the parlor, he sketched quietly in the corner, occasionally glancing up as though to memorize her profile. He never touched her, never demanded she speak like Helena, never tried to make her sleep in his bed. He only asked her to wear Helena's dresses, at breakfast, on walks, in the evenings, always with a strange sorrow in his gaze, as though he knew he was wrong, but didn't know how else to survive. On the 4th day, the storm came. Thunder broke over the mountains, shaking the windows. Rain hammered the roof in relentless sheets. The cabin felt suddenly too small, too full of memories pressing against the walls. Rosalind sat in the parlor, heart thudding as lightning flashed, illuminating the portraits one by one. Helena laughing, Helena reading, Helena pregnant. Another strike, another flash, another reminder she was a shadow wearing someone else's skin. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Matthias appeared in the doorway, hair damp from where he'd stepped outside to secure the shutters. You're frightened, he said softly. No, she lied. Lightning lit the sky again. She flinched. He stepped inside, slower this time, as though approaching a wounded animal. It's a summer storm. It will pass. Rosalind twisted her hands in her lap. I'm not frightened of storms. His eyes narrowed. Then what? You? She wanted to say. This house, this feeling of being two women at once, the fear that if I breathe wrong, smile wrong, speak wrong, you'll shatter again. She lifted her chin. I'm frightened of not knowing who to be. Matthias froze. What do you mean? She rose, the dress shifting around her hips. You want someone who isn't here anymore, someone beautiful and kind and beloved, and I'm just the closest shape. His breath hitched. I never said you had to. But you did, Rosalind whispered. Every time you look at me and see her, every time you call me Helena, every time you ask me to wear her skin. A flash of lightning lit his face, pain carved into every line. He stepped back once, twice. Then, without a word, he turned and walked into the studio, slamming the door behind him. Rosalind's hands shook. She sank back into the chair, breathing hard, thunder vibrating through the floorboards. She had broken something. Maybe it needed to break. Hours passed, storm still raging. At last, the studio door opened. Matthias stood in the doorway, a charcoal smear across his wrist, eyes haunted. Rosalind, he said quietly. Her heart stopped. He'd spoken her name. Come here, he said. Slowly, trembling, she crossed the room. He held out a sketch, hands shaking. It wasn't Helena. It was her. Not dressed as Helena, not posed as Helena. Her. Rosalind, sitting in the rocker. Rosalind, looking frightened and brave all at once. Rosalind with real eyes and real fears and a heart he had never bothered to see until now. "I drew this tonight," he whispered. "For the first time in 10 years, I didn't draw her." Rosalind's eyes blurred. "Why?" "Because I realized," he said, voice breaking, "that a ghost cannot save me. But maybe you can." She stepped closer. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her as though seeing her for the very first time. No illusions, no shadows, no dead woman reflected in her face. Just Rosalind. Her breath trembled. "What do you want me to be now?" Matthias closed the gap between them, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the heat of him. "Yourself," he said, "only yourself." But outside, in the roar of the storm, a question remained. Could a heart built to worship the dead ever truly love the living? Thunder rolled through the valley long after the worst of the storm had passed, low and distant now, like something too tired to rage any longer. Rosalind stood in the doorway of the studio, breath unsteady, staring at the sketch Matthias had placed in her hands. Her, not Helena. Lines soft but sure, shadows tender, a face drawn with reverence instead of desperation. She traced the charcoal strokes with trembling fingertips. "You drew me," she whispered. "Not because you remind me of her," Matthias said behind her. "Not tonight." Rosalind turned. The man who stood there looked different. Exhausted, yes, but something in him had shifted. A crack had opened in the stone he'd carved around himself, and grief, raw and human, pulsed beneath. He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I built this house to keep Helena alive. Every log, every painting, every thread in every dress, I built it so I didn't have to bury her." His voice broke. "But when I asked you to wear her clothes, when you looked at me like I'd gutted you," he swallowed hard, "I realized I'd buried myself instead." Rosalind clutched the sketch to her chest. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't." His voice was soft, gravelly. "You woke me." A strange, aching warmth spread through her ribs. "Matthias, why did you bring me here truly? $500 is more money than I've ever seen." He walked past her, toward the tall window streaked with rain. His silhouette was stark against the pale dawn beginning to seep between the clouds. "You want the truth?" he asked without turning. "Yes." He inhaled slowly. "The day Helena died, I lost more than a wife. I lost myself. And when I saw you on that platform, the world stopped. For a single breath I believed, truly believed, that she'd come back." Rosalind's throat tightened painfully. "But then," he continued, "you looked up, and you were frightened, alone, humiliated, and something in me broke. Not because you reminded me of her, but because you reminded me of myself." Her breath caught. "Yourself?" He nodded, still facing the window. "I know what it is to belong to grief, to be owned by something that doesn't care if you live or die." He exhaled shakily. "And I couldn't leave you there. I wouldn't." The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them had ever said aloud. Rosalind stepped closer until she stood beside him. "Thank you," she murmured, "for seeing me at all." He turned toward her slowly. "I didn't. At first, I only saw what I wanted to see. That's my shame." "You don't owe me anything," she said. "No," Matthias answered, "but I owe you the truth." He motioned toward a wooden chest in the corner. "Sit with me." Rosalind settled onto a woven rug as Matthias knelt and unlocked the chest. Inside lay letters, sketches, folded fabrics that had once been dresses Helena wore before pregnancy, changed her shape. He lifted a small wooden box and opened it. "Helena kept secrets from me," he said. "Things I learned only after she died." Rosalind stiffened. "What kind of secrets?" He unfolded a letter, yellowed and creased with years. "This," he said slowly, "is from her doctor, a month before she conceived." He handed it to Rosalind. She read silently. "Mrs. Thornwood, as we discussed, pregnancy poses significant risk given your condition. I urge you to reconsider trying for a child." Rosalind's heart lurched. "She knew it was dangerous," Matthias murmured. "She knew she could die, but she wanted so badly to give me a family." His voice cracked. "And when she went into labor, there was nothing anyone could do." He raked a hand through his hair. "For years, I blamed myself, for choosing her life over the baby's, for letting her carry the child at all." His eyes glistened. "But it wasn't my choice. It was hers. She decided she loved me enough to risk everything." Rosalind gently placed the letter in his hands. "And she would want you to live, not to build a grave you walk through every day." Matthias shut his eyes, pain and gratitude battling across his features. "You sound like her," he whispered. Rosalind's heart twisted. "Not because I look like her, I hope?" "No," he said, opening his eyes. "Because you're kind in ways no one has ever been to me since she died." She couldn't speak for a moment. The storm outside faded to a whisper. A bird began to trill hesitantly in the trees, the first sign of morning trying to break through. Matthias rose and offered her a hand. "Come, there's something else I need to show you." Rosalind let him lead her down a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before. At the bottom was a small cellar room, cool, quiet, smelling faintly of cedar and turpentine. He lit a lantern, its warm glow revealing a single easel draped with cloth. "This," he said, voice low, "is the last thing I painted before I fled Philadelphia." He lifted the cloth. Rosalind gasped. It was Helena, weak, exhausted, cradled in hospital sheets, her eyes still full of love even as death reached for her. The painting was unfinished, brush strokes frantic, desperate, blurring the line between devotion and madness. Matthias touched the edge of the canvas lightly. "This broke me, because this was the moment I stopped being a man and became a ghost." He let the cloth fall back over the painting. "I don't want to be a ghost anymore," he said quietly. Rosalind's breath shivered in her chest. "Who do you want to be?" He turned to her. For the first time, there was no grief clouding his gaze, no blind desperation to resurrect the dead. Only a man looking at a woman, not a replacement, not a shadow, but someone alive and real. "I want to be someone who sees you," he said. "You, Rosalind, not Helena." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The lantern cast soft light over him, over her, over the narrow space that suddenly felt too small to hold everything shifting between them. "Matthias," she whispered. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she felt the warmth of him. "Let me earn your trust," he said, "not because you remind me of someone I lost, but because you are someone I want to keep." Her breath trembled. This wasn't the end of the conflict. It wasn't even the true beginning. Shadows still clung to the corners of the house. Questions still lingered about his grip on sanity, about whether love could grow in a home still half buried in grief. But for the first time since she arrived, Rosalind felt seen, and somewhere deep inside her, a fragile, dangerous hope stirred. Winter announced itself early that year. Frost crawled across the cabin windows each morning, silvering the edges of the world as if the mountain were holding its breath. Inside, warm lamplight softened the wooden walls and made the studio glow like a sanctuary. But sanctuaries don't stay untouched for long. It happened 3 days after Matthias showed Rosalind the cellar, 3 days after he admitted, haltingly, painfully, that he wanted to see her, not Helena's shadow. They were in the kitchen. Rosalind was kneading dough. Matthias was cutting firewood for the stove. A peaceful quiet stretched between them, comfortable, domestic, shockingly normal. Then hooves thundered up the path. Matthias froze mid-movement. "Stay behind me." Rosalind wiped flour from her hands, pulse spiking. "Who is it?" "No one comes up this mountain unless they want something dangerous." He grabbed his rifle from above the door just as 3 riders burst through the trees, their horses snorting steam into the cold air. At the front was a man Rosalind had never seen, but Matthias knew him at once, his face drained of color. "Thaddeus Harper," he said under his breath. "Her father?" Rosalind staggered. "My father?" The man who swung off the horse was tall, lean, weathered by sun and rage. His eyes, sharp, dark, burning with old fury, landed on Rosalind first. "You!" His voice was a knife's edge. "You shouldn't be alive." Rosalind stepped back instinctively. "Pa, don't call me that." He spat on the ground. "You ran from your responsibilities. You cost our family its reputation. And now I hear you've shamed us further, sold like cattle in the town square." Matthias stepped forward sharply. "That's enough." Harper glared. "And you, the fool who bought her." Matthias's shoulders tensed, but his voice stayed level. "Rosalind is under my protection." "Protection?" Harper barked a laugh. "You don't know her kind. Soft, lazy, either eating or crying, never useful. Her mother spoiled her rotten, and now look at her." His eyes cut Rosalind from head to toe. A burden from the day she was born. Rosalind couldn't breathe. She had known her father's cruelty, but hearing it here, spoken aloud in front of Matthias, it slashed deeper than any knife. Matthias leveled his rifle, not pointed, but ready. "You need to leave, now." Harper smiled thinly. "Not without what belongs to me." He jabbed a finger toward Rosalind. "She owes debts under my name. She goes where I say." Rosalind whispered, I don't owe you anything. You gambled our money away. You signed my name without telling me." "Details," he snapped. "You're coming with me." "No," Matthias said. Harper's eyes narrowed. "I wasn't talking to you." Matthias chambered around with a slow, deadly click. Rosalind stepped between them. Her legs trembled, but her voice steadied as something old inside her finally snapped free. "No," she said to her father, not as a daughter, but as a woman. "You don't own me." Harper turned toward her, shock flickering. "What did you say?" "I said no." She swallowed hard. "You called me weak my whole life. You told me I would never be loved, never be wanted, that I would die alone because no man would ever choose me." Matthias stiffened, grief and fury colliding in his eyes. Rosalind continued louder now. "But you were wrong. I am not worthless. I am not a burden." She lifted her chin. "And I am not yours." Harper's jaw clenched. "You think this man loves you? He bought you." Matthias spoke before she could answer. "I didn't understand what I was doing then, but I do now." He stepped beside Rosalind, shoulder to shoulder, rifle steady. "She is not yours. She is not mine. She is herself, and she isn't going anywhere with you." The riders behind Harper shifted uneasily. The tension thickened like storm clouds. Harper sneered, "You'll regret this, both of you." He swung onto his horse. "This mountain isn't far enough to hide her from her debts," he warned, "and it isn't strong enough to hide you from the consequences." Then he yanked the reins and galloped off, his men following in a thunder of hooves, fading into the distance. When silence finally settled again, Rosalind's legs buckled. Matthias caught her before she fell. "You did it," he murmured, voice shaking with awe. "You faced him." She clung to him, breath ragged. "I was so scared." "I know." He held her tighter. "But I've never been prouder." Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting through the cold air as if the mountain itself were trying to wash the bitterness away. But they both knew one truth. Thaddeus Harper would return. And next time, he wouldn't come with words. He would come with fire. Night came quietly, as if the mountain wished not to disturb the fragile calm that had settled after Harper's departure. Snow softened everything it touched, the trees, the path, even the roof of the cabin, wrapping the world in a gentle hush. But inside, the silence pulsed with something heavier. Matthias set another log on the fire. The flames rose slowly, their glow reaching across the room until it brushed Rosalind's face. She sat curled on the edge of the rug, knees drawn close, her breaths still uneven from the confrontation. Matthias lowered himself beside her. "You're shaking." "I know," she whispered. "I think my body hasn't realized it's over." He nodded. "Mine either." She looked toward the door, where wet boot prints still lingered from Harper's visit. "He won't give up." "No," Matthias said softly. "But neither will I." She swallowed. "Matthias, I'm afraid he'll hurt you because of me." He shook his head. "You're not something bad that happened to me, Rosalind." His voice dropped, rough with sincerity. "You're the first good thing." Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither moved. Only the fire crackled, warming the cold corners of the room. Finally, she whispered, "I never thought I'd hear someone say that." Matthias leaned back against the hearth, eyes reflecting firelight. "When he spoke to you that way, it was like watching someone break a painting with their bare hands. Something precious, something they had no right to touch." A tear slid down Rosalind's cheek. Not a sob, not a tremble, just a quiet, aching release. "I don't know how to be loved," she said. "No one ever taught me." Matthias reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. "You don't need to know how," he said. "Just stay." She looked at their joined hands, hers soft and fuller, his calloused and careful. "Stay where?" He squeezed gently. "Here, with me." The words landed in her chest like a promise, but fear, old and ingrained, still flickered through her. What if I'm not enough for you? What if someday you look at me and only see the parts of Helena I'll never match? He turned to her fully then, expression open in a way she had never seen. "Rosalind, I don't want another Helena. I want you, only you." Her breath trembled. He lifted her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heartbeat. Steady, warm, undeniably alive. "This home was built for a ghost," he said quietly. "But now I want it to be yours. Ours, if you'll have it." The fire cracked. Something inside Rosalind cracked too. Something old and brittle that had shielded her for years. She moved closer, until her shoulder brushed his arm, until her forehead could rest against his cheek. "I want that," she whispered. "I want a home. I want this with you." His arm wrapped around her, tentative at first, then sure. Snow drifted outside. The fire glowed brighter. Two wounded souls leaned into each other, not as stand-ins or shadows or replacements, but as people choosing, for the first time, a life that might finally belong to them. Was this fragile love enough to withstand the storm her father promised to bring? Or had the mountains simply given them a moment's peace before the world demanded its price? If you're hearing this right now, whether you're in a tiny apartment, a crowded train, a bedroom lit only by your phone, or halfway across the world, I want you to feel something very simple. Stories connect us. Maybe you've been Rosalind once in your life, unseen, unheard, underestimated. Maybe you've been Matthias, carrying a love you didn't know how to let go of. Wherever you are, drop a comment and tell me, what country are you listening from tonight? And if you still believe in love that heals, protects, and chooses you even when the world doesn't, then stay, because the next story is already waiting for you.